What's up gamers, DreamcastGuy here, reviewing today the Grandia HD Collection. Normally when I do these deep dive videos, I like to start off with the positives, to try and talk about why a particular game is special or fun, when sometimes I think I need to do the opposite. Today what we're going to be doing is digging into the negatives first, because in general, this is exactly what I wanted. I consider myself to be one of the biggest Grandia fans on the planet. I have not only managed to track down and beat every single game in the franchise, including the ones that weren't translated into English, I've tried to actually understand the greater context of the series. This sort of popped up during the late 90s, when almost everybody was trying to invent their own version of Final Fantasy. Everybody wanted to have a massive RPG that would sell millions and millions of copies, and funny enough, this one, almost by accident, ended up creating what I consider to be the best turn-based combat that has ever been developed. But now, seeing it in the modern context, it feels different. Better for the most part, but some of the decisions they decided to make with this collection are so strange. Now let me begin with by far my biggest gripe, which is why the heck are you calling it the Grandia Collection when it's the first two games? There are 7 entries in the series if you count the weird Game Boy spin-off, so why are you calling this the Grandia Collection when really it should be called Grandia Origins? Moving past that though, we need to talk about the port, what they decided to do with this, because while you are getting 2 separate, very different games in this, additionally, you do need to consider that Grandia 1 and Grandia 2 in this version of it are drastically different games. I mean, they're almost completely separate projects that happen to be packaged together in one little bundle. To begin with, let's dig into Grandia 1, because this is certainly the project that's going to probably confuse people more. So this was originally released back on the PlayStation, and it had sprite art. It was very minimalized, but it functioned because it left a lot of room for imagination. It was cutesy, it was weird, and it was very fun to explore. So what they decided to do with this game is, basically, they completely smoothed everything out. They put some sort of weird filter in it that basically makes everything try and look like fake HD. I mean, that's really the only way I can describe it, because when you see this compared to the original assets, it seems like they just pressed smoothing in one of those bad emulators. Now additionally, there is some background stuff in this that I think is actually drastically improved. So while the smoothing looks weird when it comes to the characters, especially in some of the more dramatic story moments, I think that this smoothing has helped the backgrounds look more modern. When I'm in a dungeon or exploring a forest, I do think that this weird choice aesthetically does stand out. Now the biggest change that they've made to Grandia 1 that I'm a huge fan of is that it looks like they somehow managed to get a hold of the original audio files and completely restore them. Every line of spoken dialogue in this is incredibly crisp. Every note of the incredibly good soundtrack is so fun to listen to. Grandia 1 was always a good game, but in my opinion, one of the problems with it is that it definitely was stuck on more archaic hardware. It wasn't something that worked exceptionally well in the new generation. This is a good way to update it. Within the options menu, you certainly have some extra choices as well for switching around the languages and stuff like that, which I think helps. It definitely makes this project a lot more appealing. But really, the main reason you should be purchasing this is Grandia 2, the piece de la resistance. This game is a masterpiece. It is seriously one of the best RPGs ever, and it certainly has the greatest RPG combat of all time. So let's talk a little bit about what they decided to do with this port and why I love this game so freaking much that I've beaten it like a million times. So Grandia 2 tells the story of this guy Ryodo, who's like a mercenary, which they call a geohound, and you're trying to help the church church escort this priestess when you discover that secretly your mission isn't just escorting this young lady, it's actually stopping the devil himself, Velmar, from eventually being awakened. It is a very, very straightforward game, and that's actually something that works really well about it. There's practically no side quests, there's not really any hidden stuff in the dungeons. It is just an A to B adventure that I love. It is very much a classic game down to its very core, and what they decided to do with this is a complete redo. This is a full remake in my opinion. It's not just sprucing it up, it's not like what they did with the PlayStation 2 version after the Dreamcast version back in the day. This is a complete overhaul. It is 60 frames a second, the character models have been fully upscaled, the backgrounds look stupendous, and every single piece of audio is so vibrant and full of life. I mean, honestly, okay, this is gonna sound dramatic, but I just want to put this out here. I'm a little bit annoyed that this game costs $40 because honestly that is a high price. $40 is a lot of money, especially because you can get a brand new game for $60. So paying that much kinda sucks. The fact that this isn't a physical edition extremely sucks. But if it really came down to it, and this may kind of ruffle some feathers, I would actually pay the $40 price tag just for this Grandia 2 version. This is so good, I am never going to play any other version of this. It is so good, there's no load screens, I mean, it is just so instantaneously satisfying whether I'm playing it docked or handheld. I love both of these games. They are extremely good, and these ports of it are very, very sharp. In case you've never actually played these games, so you don't understand why they're so special, let's just take a look at some random fights. So the main thing that really makes this franchise special is this weird way you actually handle your encounters. When you're running around the world map, you will see bad guys, and you can either sneak up behind them, or they sneak up behind you, but whenever you touch them, the fight begins. Then there's this little bar at the bottom of the screen that essentially tells you when you get a chance to attack. It's a little like waiting ATB system, active time battle, but the big thing that makes this interesting is when it's your turn to attack, you can choose to do magic, or just bash them with your sword, or try and do a giant heal. And depending on what you do, you can actually interrupt their cast times, or stall them on their bar. So there's really this crazy strategy to it of trying to deter the strongest enemy attacks and keep yourself up and standing as long as possible. There is such a fascinating extra layer to every single move, where you really have to think just 5 steps ahead. Should I heal this person? Should I try and kill that person who's hurting us the most? Should I try and revive my friend? That way we have an extra person on the bar to try and stop them from getting their next phase faster. I mean, sometimes I would actually just try and rush headlong into enemies that were throwing magic to try and chop them up before they had a chance to finish their next cast, because even physically tapping somebody can hit them back on the bar. It is something that sounds so minor, but it's not. These are seriously the most addictive battles I have ever played in an RPG from this era. This is just really one of those games where you can spend hours and hours and hours grinding and leveling up and mastering your own special abilities and never once get tired of it for a second. But more than this, I do appreciate the goofy stories. Grandia 1 and Grandia 2 take place in the same universe, but they don't exactly have a ton of overlap. They're sort of just taking place in the same setting and the same planets, but people aren't just hanging out with each other. And I like this because I definitely think that they've always kind of established this universe in a good way. I understand the religion and the struggle and the grander context of what's going on. And now, having them both in HD and playable back-to-back, I think for the first time I have a grander appreciation for what this is, why it is different, and why it is something that absolutely should be respected. I want Grandia 3 now. I guess that's one of the biggest things, is that it's making me even more hungry for a bigger collection in the future. Give us Grandia Extreme. Give us the Grandia MMO that kind of got canceled. Give us all the other stuff. Make a true Grandia collection. And more than that, give us a physical edition that we can pre-order today instead of this cheapo digital nonsense. Okay, so we've heard some good and some bad, but let's go over the ratings board and put a big number on it. I am giving the Grandia HD Collection a 9.5 out of 10. There are certainly some issues in this game that could be better, or hopefully will be patched, but it's just undeniable that this is still freaking Grandia. This is still one of the best RPGs that has ever been created, all packaged together into a nice little device. I'm happy with this. It could be improved, and I certainly hope it will be, but it's here, it's great, and I think that we're all going to love it for years to come. Thanks so much for watching, gamers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. Grandia! Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.